Okay, so we're continuing Hilchot Taaruvot Siman Kuf Yud. We went over Sif Hey, but we'll review some of the main points of this Seif and perhaps touch a little bit on Sif Vov. The actual Seif, the actual Halacha in Sif Hey, we said was taken from the Rashba. Beis Yosef brings down that these are the words from the Rashba, that meat that is taken from a butcher, even if it's a chaticha ruyu liskabed, and later on we discovered that there was a treifa in this store. And obviously, lo noidu chatichas a treifa. We don't know which ones are the chatichas a treifa. Ve'eno yodea me'eze lokach, from which piece he took. So we said that kol ma shelokhu me'makulin kodem shenitzas a treifa motor. Anything that was taken from this particular butcher store before they knew of the treifa, before they found the treifa, is mutter. Because in this case, the suffix was not in the kavua. Was kavua an established place, an established isser. It's only an elala'achar shepirish. It only occurred after it was already pirish. In other words, the meat has already been sold to the butcher or distributed. And since the roiv, that's an important point in this store, is kosher, so you have a Taaruvot which is kosher. But obviously to take from now on you can't. From now on you can't, because you have here a kavua of sorts. You have here a kavua of sorts, and the Ikar Adin, the Mechaber says, you cannot take chaticha ruyu liskabed. And he says, even a chaticha she'ena ruyu liskabed. Only because people are not keen to distinguish between which one is chaticha ruyu liskabed and which one is not. What's the difference? I mean, if it's not a chaticha ruyu liskabed, then me'ikar adin should not be a problem, because you have a regular taruvos, you have a mixture in the store, and perhaps we should close the door a little bit. Yeah. So some say it's a chumrah, some say it's me'ikar adin. Either way, we understand that on the one hand, there should be bitul beroiv, it's in the store. On the other hand, we're concerned that they may take from the chaticha ruyus liskabed, and therefore we aser even those pieces that are not royal liskabed.
Because they won't make a distinction.
Only because they won't make a distinction. That's what appears to be from the words of the Mechaber, at least. It appears to be that all it is a chumrah. Now, based on this thing, the Beis Yosef...
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So, do we say that a piece of atu is a chumrah? Is the atu is a chumrah?
Yes.
Atu is always chumrah.
Yeah, sure. Now, they may not. They may not be able to know to make a distinction. Because some pieces, is this a real liskabed? It's not a real liskabed. And since, by the way, we're talking about this difficulty in making a distinction, the Shach says, we might as well repeat it in the name of the Bach, that the Haina Tamo, Kiven Shataruvas b'mekulin hu sherabim koinim, misham, many people come into the store. Korov adover litois, so the possibility for mistake is greater. Masha'inkin benis'arif kach liyochid bebeisai. If you have that same situation where you have in your home a whole stack, a whole bunch of meat, and some of it is chatichos aruyos liskabed. Obviously, you're not going to have the chatichos aruyos liskabed for the same reason, because they're not bottled. Only because of that, it's a ben drabono, they're not bottled be'elef. But the other chatichas that are mixed with heter, roiv heter that you have in your home, in the freezer you have roiv heter from the past that you've bought, you've frozen it, right? It's all mixed now. You prepared your child. You're told, there's a treifa in the store that you just bought. Well, was it this week? Was it last week? Right? In the home, it would be mutter to have the other chatichas that are not royally skabed. In other words, that chashash, as the Shach brings out, the shame the Bach, would only be in a store where people may come to have difficulties in this thing. But at home, you should not have that problem, and it would be mutter.
Because otherwise, we would have to forbid it all, regardless of whether it came, if it
right.
thing occurred in the store. We don't do it.
Right.
This in the home. Why should the case be different here? In other words,
no, the chashash does not exist so much in the home as it does in the store, where you have many people coming in. That's all. Yeah.
That's
right.
it.
Right. Now,
but if you were to say in this case that at home you have to throw everything in, then would you be able to permit the chatichot aruyos chabed if it didn't occur in the store?
What do you
Is that
mean?
my question?
No.
Here we have a case where did the treifa come? I don't know
Right.
if I even have it at home.
Right, we don't know for sure.
Okay.
Right.
Now let's say, and you would forbid it. You would say you have to throw everything out, like in the store, also at home. Let's say one.
Let's say, okay.
Now, what if a person went and bought kosher meat,
Right.
and a friend, a neighbor, happened to leave a piece of meat in the house that's a hatucha that's treif,
Right.
and he cooked the two together. Today, normally we say if he has 60 in the not royally chabit,
The rest is mutter.
the rest is mutter. We say today.
We still do.
Now, when we say, and we know for sure there is a treifa now in the house.
Right.
Now, in the case of the store, we don't know for sure there's a treifa in the house. So just because it happened in the store would forbid the whole, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but you took from a makom kavur, you took from the store.
Yeah.
Right? You took from the store, and the only problem here is you took it before it was Niddah.
Right.
That's the chiluk over here, which I'm going to elaborate a little bit more again, what difference it makes, Niddah or lo Niddah. But obviously the problem here is we're dealing now with the topic of kavua.
But
right?
even if it was kabua, if it already became,
All right.
let's say it's not a.
So you could still have a treifus in the store.
That's
So,
it. But
so now we're talking about from
person
now on.
bought in a store.
Right.
And we have the typical case not of
Right.
Noida. We have the typical case he bought in a store. He doesn't remember which store or
But remember, the
and it became
halacha.
mixed at home.
Yeah,
You have to
no.
throw
But
everything
remember,
out.
because the first half of the halacha was all the meat that you bought before the treifa was revealed is mutter.
I'm saying you don't have this case. You have the normal case.
Right.
He doesn't know where he bought in a store that's
Right.
treif or not treif. He has
Right.
one store that's treif. He really doesn't remember where he bought.
Sure.
Or one of those other cases. And now he already cooked the food.
Right.
Does he have to throw everything out?
Well, that's the shaila of gilu milsa lemafreya, right? That we had. That the Ra'ah says that you can have a kavua lemafreya that you bought. You don't know from which store you bought,
Right.
and you were told that there's treifus
Right.
in one of the stores. That's kavua, right?
And now you mixed whatever you bought.
Now you bought it, and later on you were told that there was
But you already
treifus.
mixed everything with
Well,
the
it makes no
meat you
difference.
had at home.
Right.
You have to throw everything out?
Well, that's what he says over here. That's where the difference would be between in your house or not. But it all depends. I don't want to mix it two cases. One is with noida and one is with lo noida. Okay? Because if, let's take the classical case of kavua. You bought from a store and you're told one of those stores is treif. Has been treif all along. So it's midaraisa also. Why? Because we say it's 50-50.
Right. Even
Right.
though we have 9 stores now.
Yeah,
Kosher,
9 that are kosher, 1 is treif. So that's a kavua. Kavua meaning that the Isser is established, it's there. It's a unique situation. It's a chiddush, like we explained. And you don't have the din of roiv chanuyos in that case. What you're saying is, but what happens now that I've taken the meat and I mixed it?
With my own meat I had at home, that's for
We
sure.
already learned about that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's the halacha of kavua that became later a taaruvot.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a whole different
That would be
halacha.
permitted. If there's 60 against it and there's
No. Remember that? That we have. Let me go over it quickly. Roiv chanuis moichos boser shchuto. Miot moichos boser nevela. Right? So you have the majority kosher, the minority nevela. Lokach machas mehe. Venu yedam eitz men lokach. So you took. Now, when you came home, something in addition to that happened. When isarvo be'acherus, it got mixed up. Eno nikeres. Betelo beroiv mishum spek speka. So once you have a majority, once you have a taruvis in the home, after the fact, according to the Mechaber, you have a sfek sfeika. We had the Ramah, that the Ramah says it's not a real sfek sfeika, right? But if you were to mix it, right, it would be, according to the Mechaber, a sfek sfeika situation, and it would be more lenient than if you would not have had the taruvis from the kavua.
So if in this situation,
Right.
you were allowed to, and in that situation that would before, wouldn't it be strange
Good
to
question.
forbid it there?
Good
and to
question.
allow
Good
forbid
question.
it
Good
here?
point. Good point. Obviously, maybe we didn't clarify enough that there's this whole nafkamina here is: are we talking about before noida or after noida? Because the whole thing, the whole chiluk here is that after noida you cannot take
Anything from the
anything, and that's where the problems begin. Before noida, you don't even need a taruvas.
Because this is fake speaker.
No, it's called the parish meruba parish. It's not even a kavua
I
d'oraisa.
don't even know.
It's not even a kavua d'oraisa yet. If anything, it
It
does.
became normal when it's already in your house.
Right.
So
that's what he says. He says that the suffix was not in the kavua, shelo nofal asod b'kavua elo la'achar shepirish. So it's not even a din of kavua. Right.
When you're dealing with
Right.
is that a technical touch? Or is it, because at some point, and you don't know whether to or not, because
Okay.
maybe it's like,
All right. Sure.
really much not.
Sure.
Okay. At what point, so that you don't have this problem?
You've been notified, by SMS, right? Or somehow, urgent, a treif animal got by.
By someone that's reliable.
Yeah.
No, but at what
Right? Got by, but for the mashgiach. The mashgiach. I mean, that's part of the job of the mashgiach.
Real
Right.
actual knowledge.
Your real actual knowledge, yeah. Not if that's a suffix too. We discussed before. That cannot be a suffix. That has to be a vadai.
The knowledge itself.
That knowledge itself has
So
to
it
be a
can't
vadai.
be, I heard someone said
That there can be.
that
Then you may have fakes all along.
I mean, because
Yeah, it's not that suffix by itself is a problem. Obviously, if it tells you, there may be here and there, well, that presents a problem. But the more sfekas you have, then of course it would be sfekas then. So it has to be a vadai. So anyway, so here we saw a difference between Niddah before and after. That it makes a difference that which was taken before is mutter, but to take from now on is also. So we mentioned the Beis Yosef that basically explains the Rashba that there is a difference when it's Niddah ha'isur. In other words, the Niddah ha'isur that makes a difference is dafka betaruvos. Dafka when you have the situation that we have in the butcher store, where all the meat right now is mixed. According to the Beis Yosef, the way he learns Pshat in the Rashba is that's where the Rashba would be maskim to say that Niddah helps. Across the board, no problem. You have a taruvas before Niddah, it's a real taruvas, it's bottle. Okay? But perhaps, I mean, the Beis Yosef doesn't say perhaps. The Beis Yosef learns Pshat in the Rashba. The Rashba would hold like the Ra'ah that says, if you took a piece of meat from a store, and you don't know which store, and you were told later on that there was a delivery of tarfus, what does the Ra'ah say? That even though it was not kavua, it's only now lemafreya, in retrospect, we find out that one of the stores did get a delivery strafe. The Ra'ah says kavua, you do say lemafreya too. And the Beis Yosef says that that's the way the Rashba would hold. Remember, there's a machloikas on how the Rashba holds. Because the Shach says there's a difference, a very fine difference. He says, I would agree that the Rashba holds like the Ra'ah that you say kavua lemafreya. In other words, after the fact too. It's also what you just bought, only if you don't know from which store you bought it from. One is strafe and you don't know, which is the classical textbook example of kavua, right? But what if you do know which store you bought it from, but you don't know which store has the treifus? Remember, that was the other scenario. On that, the Shach explains that he would not hold like the Ra'ah. We won't say kavua lemafreya on that one. That's not the typical example, because the whole kavua is a chiddush. Then it has to be like the original chiddush is. You don't know which store you bought it from. But when you do know the store, there's a suffix where the meat, the treif meat is, that's already a taruvas chanuyos of sorts. It's a mixture of stores. That's, if anything, that's a kavua derabanan. But that's not a real kavua. Okay, so it all depends how you learn. Do you hold by lemafreya like the Ra'ah, not hold it? Or do you hold sometimes and not the other, depending on the case? But one thing for sure, the Chaber quotes the Rashba, that as far as our case of ta'aruvas in the store, before Niddah, no problem. When is it a problem? From now on. Obviously. What's the chiddush? The chiddush is even the chatichus which are not royal iskabed, which I would think they're bottle. We still have a taruvas, and this is not a real kavua either, because of Niddah. Okay? Still, that's the chiddush, because you may come to mix. Even though the Torah says, what are you talking about? This is a real kavua too. We said the Torah has a different understanding. What do you mean? Oh, this should be just as much kavua as anything else. So there's different ways of understanding the Rashba over here. But at least, we know it's at least a chumrah, according to one pshat. I did see, by the way, I may have forgotten to tell you, Beis Yosef does bring a tshuva sarosh that in a makulin, in a butcher store, we would not allow pirish. Once we determined that something is aser there in that store, you would not allow pirish. Let's say somebody, somehow a piece of meat got taken from there later on.
From the store itself.
From the store itself. After we know it's aser, it would not be mutter.
But if someone found it out on the street...
No, it would not be mutter. Also not.
Even on the street?
Later after it's Niddah. That's the chidush.
But if we have
taking it yourself is for sure aser.
I'm saying...
Likach mekam be'elech aser. And we spoke about what would be the din of b'di'evid. There's a din of what happens...
I must be sending...
1 second. There's a din of... there was a machlokes on the Rashba if the Isur to take chaticha roilis kabed is also b'di'evid, if it's also b'di'evid. But that's a separate machlokes. In the Tshuva Sarosh, it just says that pirish would be asur. What's interesting about this pirish would be asur that even in the din of kavua, which the Raisa says mechzel mechze, we hold pirish is mutter. When you didn't take it yourself, when you found it, it came from one of the stores, right? Why is their pirish mutter and this pirish would be asur according to Tshuva Sarosh?
How can you permit it there if you're asur it?
So here he says, because here people may come to take and buy from this store if you allow pirish. Whereas over there, we're not choishet that somebody's going to go to the treif store, the one that is for sure treif, lo chashdinan. We don't expect that people that we're dealing with, he says that we're dealing with Rishonim, that they can actually go to the treif store.
If they are Rishonim, then there's no point in giving them halacha.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's an interesting aside, that Tshuva Sarosh that I saw, that the pirish in the makulin would not be mutter. Interesting.
Do we pass them like that, or is that something?
That's something that he brings down. I'm not sure how we paskin that. He's machmer. Pirish ordinarily we're makel on, so that would be an interesting chumrah. Yeah. All right, let's go on. What I want to do right now is just review some additional points.
The interesting thing is here, the chances that it is the meat that you found on this is actually the treifa beef is less likely than if you have a treifa butcher there.
Right. But it was again. But it's a chumrah. But he says it's a chumrah for some other reason. Yeah, that's all. So apparently it's only a chumrah. Not everybody would go along with it. Okay, now let's get to some interesting scenarios, I guess we can call it, possibilities as a result of the halachas that more or less we understand right now. That we're still dealing with a situation of possible kavua, maybe not kavua, because it's noida only after the fact, and we have a taruvas. Okay? It's not the same taruvas as we had before, it's a taruvas in the store. The other situation of taruvas were where you actually took it and then it got mixed in at home or somewhere else. Here it's a different kind of situation. Even though it is a taruvas, from the point that we know already that there's a treifas there, that's the chiddush of this seif. Not only is that what you bought before mutter, but that which you would like to buy right now is a problem. And even if it's not a chaticha ruyu l'skabed, it's a chumrah because people may not be able to distinguish between the two. Okay, fine. Now, the Taz says something very interesting, and I mentioned it briefly last time. He has a problem, an issue with an animal that part of it is mutter, part of it is asur. How could you say that the same animal you have two contradictory halachas in the same animal? Either the animal is treif or the animal is kosher. Why? What's the issue here? You have an animal that was cut up to pieces. That's what they do in the butcher. And some pieces are chaticha ruyu l'skabed, right? And some not. And they're all mixed, right? They're all mixed. So what do we say? The me'ikra din, only the chatichas aruyos l'skabed is asur, but the one that are not should be mutter.
Provided we have so.
Huh?
Provided we have sure.
Right. Does that make sense? He says that part of the animal should be asur, chaticha ruyu l'skabed, and part of it should not me'ikra din. That is. He says it doesn't make sense. If it's the same animal, how could you have half the animal being asur and half the animal being mutter?
Does Shach comment on this?
Yeah, of course. And the Chavaz Das goes along with this Taz. Very interesting. How could this be? Now, this is what I like about this Taz, even though there's a very good answer from the Shach, in the Kudas HaKesef, I think, what I like about this is because this will help us understand a famous incident that occurred in Vilna. You know, this way of thinking of the Taz, that is it possible to have, first of all, you may argue, why not?
Well, especially since that is
Right.
the case. We have the chaylet, we have the
Okay,
different
no,
parts.
yeah.
So, but we always have things in an animal that are forbidden next to.
No, but here we're talking about the halacha. Halacha is a very specific halacha here.
So I would
That
say
we're saying the same halacha here on this, it would be usher, on that it would be mutter.
So I would say when it comes to the halacha, it's even easier.
Yeah.
The argument is the animal, not the halacha.
Now, he does say, however, that in Siman Kuf Aleph, when we talk about Biura later on, we talk about Chaticha Ru'us Kabed, we did say that if the Chaticha Ru'us Kabed got cut up, all of a sudden it becomes mutter. He says, what about that? That,
No longer, it's that.
what?
What's lost then?
Right.
That's exactly. You're not allowed to do the hatchila.
Yeah. But it first got mixed in as a Chaticha Ru'us Kabed, and then it got cut up. He says, if you want to ask on that, how is that possible that, it's also then it's mutter, he says, don't compare this case to that case, because there we're dealing with one chaticha ru'us kabed. In other words, when you have a chaticha ru'us kabed that gets cut up, that's the din over there with a chaticha ru'us kabed. But that's not the case over here. All right, that's all he says. In other words, don't ask me from that. Over there, it is a separate din on a chaticha ru'us kabed that gets cut up. Here, we're dealing with chatichas, with many chatichas, and we're saying they are also and they make our dinar mutter. Therefore, he has a hard time saying, that that's what the din should be, and obviously, according to him, that everything should be also not michumra meikar din. There are some who hold that it's not a chumra, it's meikar din. Everything should be also. All right. The Kudas HaKesef gives here two explanations. The Shach. He disagrees. He says, first of all, the whole Ikar Adin of Bittul, of Chaticha Ru'us Kabed, is at the Rabbanon. Right? And therefore...
So it's not in the Heftzit?
Right.
It's in the Heftzit.
Right. So he says, we don't have to therefore be concerned that something is Asr and something is Mutter. The whole thing is at the Rabbanon anyway. It's a Chumrah. That's his first explanation. He says, it's not like you're saying, this is Asr and this is Mutter. This is just a...
Right, so they're both mutter.
You're right. It's just a Derabanan anyway. Why make a big deal out of it? That's what the Nekudas
They made a decree. So they're making a decree like this.
Exactly. Right. So he says that's number one. In other words, one could be Asu, one could be Mutter. And he says, and even the din of in a din of Deoraisa, not in a Derabanan, it's not a big deal that part should be Mutter and part should be Asur. How do I know? He says, because you see it from the din of Kavua too. In the din of Kavua, what did we say? Kol Kavua kemechze mechze dameh, that you went into a store and you bought something, you don't know from which store, and that's a Doraisa, that's how we hold. However, if from that same Kavua situation there was Pirish, it will be Mutter. Pirish as opposed to buying it yourself. It was Pirish. You found it in the street. And we say called the Porish Meruba Porish. So you can see in a similar scenario where there is a Kvias Isser somewhere, but it was Porish from there. You didn't take it yourself.
It depends how we categorize it.
Right. Right. So you can see that in a similar, even though it's not exact same, but in a similar scenario where you have a Kvias Isser, if it's Pirish, it would be Mutter, and if it was Kavua, if you bought from the Kavua, it would be Asr. So what's the big deal? You can have sometimes something is Asr, and sometimes something is Mutter in the same meat, in the same cow, in the same animal. So that's what the Kudas HaKesef, the Shah, basically disagrees with the Taz. It's not a big deal, it's not a problem. So now it's time for us to review an incident that occurred in Vilna. This one was very interesting. A long time ago, apparently. An incident occurred in Vilna where they slaughtered many animals. And there was one store, one butcher, that part of the animal was sold, people took it home, and part of the animal remained in the store. Then it was discovered later on that there was a treif animal somewhere. What is the din of the piece of meat that I took home and the piece of meat that remained behind?
Behind the physical or
It remained in the store.
What if I bought it and elected to pick it?
No, nobody says that made a difference.
So I'm just asking.
It's at the store.
Presence.
It's at the presence. The physical presence is at the store, which makes it a kavua. Because remember, once we know something is there's a treifa, you can't buy now. Remember, you can't go and take. It's kavua. But this is before Niddah. Clearly mutter. But here, wait a minute. Doesn't it sound a little bit familiar? It appears that you may have a situation where part of the animal will be mutter and part of the animal will be asr. Is that possible? What would be the din then? Do you say because the first part that was already taken home from that same animal, we're not talking from the same animal, was mutter, called the porish, right? For Niddah, right? Or do you say, because the second half of the animal that's in the store that is asr, therefore we make the first half that was taken home asr too? Or do you make them both asr? Or do you make them both mutter? Since the first part was taken that was mutter, you say what remained from the same animal is also mutter. This was a big, big deal. A big, big suffix amongst the poskim of that generation. We're talking about the same animal, right? Because otherwise, obviously, that's
that animal was treif.
No, we don't.
There was some treif.
Right, there was some treif animal. So here we talk about the same animal, so there's no taruvos. But if you already say that, you claim that which was taken home is mutter, then what about that which remained from the same animal? Why shouldn't that be mutter too? You follow? So this, as soon as I saw that story, as soon as I read the story, I said, wait a minute, I can now understand or relate better to the Taz.
I thought that was the kiss.
No, the Taz was referring to this seif, just to this seif, about saying, some should be mutter, some should be osir. But here we have one animal, and it's the perspective is a little bit different, because you're applying the halacha to the same animal. So there's no taruvas here, and there's no gzera here in a sense either. It's just a question about what's the din of the rest of the animal. If the first half, you can't have the same animal being treif and being kosher. Very good question.
Well,
right, that was the question.
But if you knew for certain that it is, then you would have the question just formulated. You can't have the same animal be treif. But here, we don't have the certain. We don't know if the animal is treif or not. And therefore, we're trying to determine, without knowing if the animal is treif or not, which halacha should apply.
Okay.
So why should we not be able to categorize the same animal differently depending on the halachic circumstances under making that ruling?
Yeah, that was part of the dilemma, and that was that you have basically four opinions. You have the opinion that holds half is mutter, half is asr. An opinion holds both are asr, both are mutter, right? What did I say, four?
Yeah.
I guess three.
Sounds more like it.
Yeah, three opinions, right? Three.
Wait a second. You say that it's completely mutter, completely asr, or the first, you wouldn't have the fourth opinion, which would be that the first one, it wasn't known as asr, and the second...
No, there's basically three opinions. The crazy place and the Pri Chodesh, they actually learn like that. Whatever you took home is mutter. Whatever remained is asr.
May I say a word in their word?
Yeah.
Because you have two cases where what you took home... When you say half is mutter, half is asr, what you took home would be mutter. If you say the case would be that both halves would be mutter, then also what you took home mutter. You only have one case where the what you took home would
that's
be
what the
asr.
Chazon Ish says. What you're saying
really?
is what the Chazon Ish says.
Wow.
The Chazon Ish says you have two svaras to be matir.
Yeah.
Right? You have two svaras to be matir, in a sense. And there are two svaras to make it asr too.
Why two?
No, there are, he says there is a way to learn both ways, but he basically puts more emphasis on this, and he says basically what is left behind should be asr, and what is taken home should be mutter. And because of that, there's more of a tzad to say there's two svaras to be matir. Yeah, based on exactly similar to what you just said. Yeah. So anyway, this was a big machloikis amongst the poskim. Some actually said both pieces are also. Once we've determined that what remains is also, the one you took home also becomes also. No, once we've determined that what you took home is mutter, what is still there is also mutter. And then you have the other ones who say no, what you took home is mutter, what remained there is also. For the obvious dinim that we follow of kavua, that from now on at least what's there you cannot have, even though it is strange. Why not? Well, that's the halacha, even though most likely.
Because there are circumstances beyond what is actually the quality of meat that now dictate that we must asr what is in the store.
Yeah. Okay, just maybe two more points we'll cover for tonight. The next point really has to do with the next seif. I'm just maybe going to read it inside, but we'll cover it more next week. We're dealing with Balei Chaim, seif Bov, B'shar Dvorim HaChashuvim Shenisarvu, important things that may have gotten mixed up. but especially balechayim, as we will see, live animals. Shnis'aru beheter, that they were obviously got mixed up with heter. Sheinam betim afilu be'elef, they cannot be bottled even be'elef. Afilu pirosh echad min haroiv. Acha shenoida taruvos, even though one came out of the roiv after we were aware of the taruvos, asur. But the good news is that's only if you took it out yourself. If it went out by itself, it's mutter. Now,
that sounds like a penalty.
Yeah, it's like a bittul isur. In other words, you cannot do it intentionally. Okay, so here you have a situation where you have animals that are mixed. That is a little bit of a different scenario. In order to better understand what's going on, we will have to learn the sugya a little bit. But the only reason I brought this up is because from this halacha, the shach and others learn, the various poskim, that whenever you have a situation of called the porish, which this one involves as well, one may come out, another may come out. At some point, many of them may come out, and they will have a din of called the porish, if it happens by itself. We understand the concept of called the porish, right? The last two will be asur. The last remaining two in this group that were mixed, that are not porish as of yet, will remain asur, because now you don't have a roiv. Okay, so that's one of the points that the Ramos mentions, which the poskim relate to, that is somewhat related to this eve, that in any situation where you have, what's the word for it, when things move away, right, from the original place, when they get scattered, when they're removed, in any way, little by little especially, and I emphasize that little by little because we will see it makes a difference if it was not little by little. But you have continuously or gradually, one at a time, being porish, you may be able to say in each one of those called the porish meruba porish, but the last two remaining would be asur. So in the Shut Darchi Noya, I saw that he holds that whoever took the last two anyway, if he took him anyway, it's asur for him to eat it. In other words, whether he knew or not, if he took him, it would be asur. And he adds something very interesting, that if we don't know who took the last two, nobody can have it.
No one can have any.
Nobody can have any of what was taken from that store. Okay, this is what he's mechadash over here. Since the last two have no din of heter, there has never therefore been a heter on the last two, you cannot take him. And if you took him, it's asur. Not only is it asur for you, if we don't know who took the last two, it's asur for everyone, which is very interesting. Yeah.
I remember distinctly that you can eat all of them. You can always call a partial meruba until the last one.
That's when you have a din of bitul. Remember, that's when you have a din of bitul.
But
different.
At the end, you have two remaining.
Yeah.
And you have two sausages. One could be the treifa.
Right.
But you can still eat. You can stay. The one that was treifa was already eaten.
When you have a real din
How is it different from this case that here we can't see the same?
When you have a real din of bitul, you can do that.
Why? How is that din of bitul over there more real?
No, because here we're dealing with the din of kavua, and the din of called the porish meruba porish. It's a little bit different. Once you have a din of bitul, you don't need a din of called the porish, according to the Rosh especially, remember? Once you have a din of bitul, something is bottle, it's bottle. It's just that we have some shittas that say do not eat all of them together at the same time, or don't have one person eat them even one after another. Because of the chumrah, of the chashash, because you're being for sure pagya in the isur.
But according to the Rosh, the isur
is gone. It's gone.
The
right.
halacha is annulled.
Yeah. Here it's not.
But according to those that don't hold Rosh,
right.
Wouldn't that be also a case
it would be similar.
Yes,
they hold that. No. That's where you learn it from. But you're still right. In essence, when you're taking one, we're saying you're taking the heter one. You're not taking the asur from right. So each one that you're taking is mutter.
So because we have kavua here, that no longer applies.
Right. So here we have a different kind of a situation here. Here we have a different kind of situation.
So we can't say bitl in a situation where we're talking about kavua.
Yeah. Here we're talking about kol the porish in the scenario of kavua.
how is that who took the last two pieces?
That's what the Darchinam says. He wants to be mechadash. If you don't know that everybody, it would be usher for everyone to eat.
Whatever
But,
they do.
yeah, but let me.
How can you apply it? You don't know who.
No one is allowed to eat anything.
No,
matter
well,
what,
anybody who
first,
bought,
second,
we would
third.
send out a notice for anybody who bought from this store on this day. You know, it would be also for you to have the meat. Anyway, it looks like the Niddah, Yehuda, the Chassam Sofer pretty much go along with this way of thinking, but the Kreisi Fleisi says no way. And I like the way the Kreisi Fleisi explains this whole situation. He says it's mashma from the Lashon Rashba that in the case of at least of Balei Chaim Shenekru, which is what I think what they're talking about, Balei Chaim, which are not bottle, right? They're mixed together. You have hundreds of animals. Shenekru, that's the case where they moved away from where they originally were. So at one point there was a kavua of animals, but what happened was the kavua was mizbatel. This is gonna be a very important chiluk in understanding kavua. Kavua can become not kavua if something happens to it. So in the case of animals being together in one place, that's kavua. The issur is there, but there was nekru. In other words, it moved away. So anyway, so the Kreisi Fleisi brings the Rashba. He says it's mashal from the Rashba. That as we will see in the next seif, that in the case of nekru, they will all be mutorim. There's no kavua. Yeah. So let me see exactly what he says here. So he says therefore, in that situation, it's very similar to our case, where people are taking pieces, right? And the suffix is only noilad after the fact that they were nekar, when people took, right? That's an important point over here. Important nekuda, that the suffix came about later on. So after people took the pieces, it should be just as mutter as our case is mutter. If we hold here that something that was nekar lost its status of kavua, so why should pieces that were together at one point be any different? Why should you have to say that the last two are any different? Once you say that pieces started moving, just like animals started moving from when they were first, it's a form of nekar, whether it's an animal or a piece of meat. And therefore, why should you have to say that the last two are any different? Once you leave, you become mutter. You've left the mokum kavua. We say that by animals, then why shouldn't we say that by pieces of meat? I think that's a very good point. I saw also Sefer Binas Odom also says the same thing, that it's understood from the Rishonim that you don't have to answer the last two pieces. The reason why the Bahag who is the one that mentions this idea of answering the last two pieces, says that the last two pieces are answered, that's only when they are kavua. In other words, you have pieces of meat that are all stacked together, and you have somebody that took a whole bunch, and some that remain behind. So if what remains behind is not roiv, obviously you can't touch them anymore. But what if somebody started taking one at a time? It would be mutter. Therefore, if that's the case, the Shach makes a good point. If you grabbed half at a time, at once, give me 35 pounds, you may run into a problem. You may not have the roiv. You cannot say, called the porish, meruba porish. So he says, it would only be shaykh to say that every one is mutter when you're actually taking one at a time. Yeah, I think that's exactly what he says. Yeah, we'll see that next time we come together, but that makes sense, because you cannot say, where is it here? It is very possible that the Isser is betoich ruba ishtar, that the Isser did in fact remain where the roiv is, and if you took a whole bunch and that's not the roiv, right, then you don't have that advantage of saying called the porish meruba porish. 1 second here. Because when you're taking one at a time, you're saying isura betoch ruba ishtar, where the majority is, that's where the isser is. But what if you took half, or you took the majority, then you can't say that. Yeah, I have to look for it where he says that. But that's pretty much the idea. In other words, it would all depend, of course, on the amount of you took. If you took one at a time, it's okay. there's a similar chakira in the Pri Megadim, very similar to what we just covered, that in a situation where one individual bought the majority of the chatichas himself, will we still say called the porish beruba porish? Or do we say that the isur beruba isa, that the isur, just like when you take a little bit, you say that the isur is probably with the majority. Do we say now that he took the majority of the meat of this cow for himself, he's making a banquet, he's a caterer, okay? Will we say the same thing, that since he took the vast amount of the cow, then he has, more likely than not, the isur by him? Or do we say called the porish? Exactly, yes. I think the Chazon Ish speaks about that. Yeah. So he says, the Pri Megadim says on his own Chakir, that if you actually took it all at once, it would be Asr. You don't have that. It makes sense. I mean, you wouldn't have the called the Porish, Meruba Porish. And the last two would also be Asr. That was for both reasons. It could be that they are Asr for the reason we mentioned before, and you have the majority by you. And that's what the Shach said before, as we said before, based on the Rashba, that Dafka Pirshu Mi'uton, that we say that the Isur is Nisha Baroiv. But if you took half, it's Asur. Yeah, anyway, Lamaisa, the Chazon Ish says the only time you could actually use this klal of kol deportion in this kind of a situation where you have the suffix at the store is when you took one at a time. Even though, after a while, of you being the only customer, it accumulated in your home. Still, you would still claim a kol deportion, as opposed to what the Shach is saying, or what the Pri Megadim is saying. If you took it all at once, you can't really make that claim anymore, because that we're saying that most likely the Isur is in the Rav. Well, where is the Rav? It happens to be you. But if you're buying one at a time, and it just could be that after 3-4 days you've bought the majority, it would be mutter, because
at any point in time what you took out of the store was considered a mutter.
Yeah, exactly.
So once it's
even though after a while, when you accumulate it, you have the majority. We're not going to say all of a sudden it's
also a
also.
wonderful example for a lot of little pieces, don't necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a very interesting point over here, that kol deporsh is only as strong as the circumstances allow for it. In other words, if obviously you're taking more than a couple pieces, then you may not be able to make that claim. You actually may have the roiv by you, and therefore the isser is by you.
We had actually when we were trying to pour out of the pot the isser, or we were worried about how much is in the pot, how much goes into the bowl. That it might be if we pour too much of the what's in the pot.
Yes, yeah. But anyway, this only applies to the situation of kavua and nechza, and called the porish, meruba porish, in this kind of a scenario. Otherwise, as we said before, we do have a regular din of bittul when we're dealing with a plain taruvos. We still have a machloikas in that, on how to eat it, how to deal with it. But that's the din of bittul, whereas this is more of a din of called a porish, because of the way it happens. It came out of the roiv, it came out or it was taken out. Just that by taking it out, you're dealing with the din of kavua. But having come out, we treat it as coming out from the roiv. That's a unique din of kol deporish. Whereas at home, when you're having a taruvas, you're not dealing with kol deporish per se. You're dealing with it, is it bottle or it's not bottle?
Is this actually, does it have anything to do with kol deporish when you're that example? Is that also called kol deporish?
No, why would that be kol deporish?
Because it's slowly, what is left in the pot is becoming less and less, increasingly more.
Yeah, you're touching on a different halacha in Yore Deah called kama bottle maybe. As you have a large barrel of wine of yain nesek that's pouring little by little into kosher wine, drop by drop, drop by drop, drop by drop, drop by drop. So that each one is becoming bottle as it's coming down. So there's of course a whole diyun, a whole discussion on when do you say kama bottle, when do you not say it. So is it until the majority, or is it a new din that even that there will not even be here a majority, because every time the drop came in. Whereas by tam, remember by tam it makes a difference, because even though you have shishim, but if you're continuously pouring and pouring and pouring that sauce that was made in Singapore, that's straight, right? The flavor is going to be there, even though it's kama bottle. You won't help the situation. But in that there are scenarios where it's only a nisur derabanan. where we may be able to be lenient. Concept of kama bato. But once you have, we don't say that the issue is completely gone if the issue is in fact there. After a while, you build it up.
Well, the whole point here was that the taste no longer noticeable.
No longer noticeable, but apparently now it's a form of choize veneer. You have revived it, and that could be happening in any case. Even if the tam was bottled, it can be revived. If it's revived, that means the tam is there, then you're back to square one.
But according to the Rosh, you shouldn't have. Because since the chet is
not by tam. Tam is tam keiker.
But now the tam would be the tam of something else.
Yeah.
Because it was misbah.
No, that's.
So now you're noticing the tam, but
no.
What are you noticing the tam? Something that's.
No, not really, because the tam. It all depends. The tam sometimes is so diluted. You're right that even though you feel it, it's not a real tam. We explained it by the tam that's diluted. But here you actually have the tam keiker. The isur is nicker. In other words, the isur is really there.
But according to those layers, so what I'm tasting is something, the taste of something, a nicker taste of something permitted?
Yeah, but remember, that could be, but at some point, eventually you can, continuously add and add and add until the whole thing becomes also. There is a limit to when you extend the.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm sorry whether according to the Rosh would also say that. Because by here, it's no longer something that's forbidden. So now that it's no longer something that's forbidden, it's like having a taaruvot of Basar that's kosher, with Basar that's forbidden. So you taste the taste of the Basar. But
by Basar, yes. Because at some point you say, listen, it's not mitzdaref with what was there before. That was the sugi that we covered about the Isur mitzdaref and zeim zeh, or Isur mivatin zeh. At some point you say, hey, you can't be mitzdaref that's already mutter stuff. Here this is not mutter stuff. Tam works different than yovish.
Yeah, except for...
Tam is tam. Yeah, either it's there or it's not.
But
remember?
The taste that's being added is originating something that as a physical entity is something mutter.
Yeah, so not necessarily. Remember, not necessarily, right? Tam was a question of whether the tam is there or tam is not there, as opposed to the yovish. It was a question of the mitzias, of whether it is or it's not. So therefore, there would be a tremendous difference, a tremendous chiluk between if it's yavish or if it's tam. Okay, we'll stop over here. Yeah.